Ryan.
Today we are learning basketball with Adam Pike. Covers the Memphis Grizzlies and the NBA draft. Does some great work on his Medium. Can't wait to dive deep into his latest piece on the Memphis Grizzlies, where he highlights, what's going on with their offense. You might have heard the quote where Draymond called it a weird offense because it's so different to kind of defend. And what stands out to me and the Draymond quote that went viral is that the entire offense stays rotating as a collective. It's like one endless relocation where the entire supporting cast is shifting in unison and kind of spacing the floor as they do it in as pristinely as possible. And it kind of keeps the defense on their toes. Defensive schemes aren't really used to that sort of rotation. There might be one person that slides down or relocates, but to have everyone in sync like that is pretty rare. And someone as great as Draymond, especially defensively, noticing how different that is kind of is a statement in of itself. But before we dive in, how are you doing today, Adam?
I'm good, thanks. How are you, Ryan?
Doing great. Really loved this article and all the different stats that you've been tracking and kind of the film breakdowns that you've worked on to kind of sum up the Grizzlies' first 25 games of the season. Super interesting stuff, right up my alley with the tracking and the stats and the film. Like I'm loving what you're doing over there. Can't wait to dive in. And so we might as well hop right into this offense and what's making it click, and what's a little bit different this year than last year.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I did like the first 25 games. I've hand tracked every possession so far, and mostly focusing on the half court. And I do like 3 different forms of offense. So I do like freelance pick and roll. So maybe sometimes you'll see just 2 players are going down the court. The big's trailing. He's going to set a drag screen for a guard. I have freelance offense, which is a little different. So it's something like no set play, no pick and roll, no handoff. So it's those type of possessions. It includes isolations and post-ups. And then the third one I track is organized offense. So organized offense, you're going to get something like horns is a classic set. Or if you think of like the Warriors like post-entry split, that's another one. So this is the 3rd year I've hand tracked it so far for every possession. So I do have something similar for last year. Last year, the biggest difference between the two, I would say, is the organized offense accounted for, I think it was about 44%. So it's nearly half of every half-court possession. The Grizzlies were running something that they organized, whether it was like wide entry where you're going to get like a big screening for a small at the top of the key, and they're going to flow into an action based off that, or you're going to get something like a classic horn set again. And this year, that number is down from like 44% to 33%. So I don't remember the exact number. I did the math in the article, and it was like, I think it was like a 35% difference. So a 35% decrease in the frequency of them using those sets. So that's the biggest thing you notice right away. And then the second, I would say, is the addition of 2 specific assistant coaches to the staff. But they replaced almost their whole coaching staff this year. They have the same head coach. They have Anthony Carter came back, Patrick St. Andrews, but everyone else is brand new.
Yeah, and you noted so many key differences between this year and last year. One thing that stood out is that Memphis has a top 5 offense that ranked 5th, and yet they run the least amount of pick and rolls and handoffs in the entire league, and it's by a wide margin. I think it was 10% less frequent than the 29th most frequent team that runs those types of sets. And when people think of modern NBA, we're thinking 40 pick and rolls a game, just endless pick and roll. So to see a team rank 5th in offense and barely even run it is eye-opening. And you note that they're top 5 in some other off-ball movement type of categories via synergy, like transition, spot-ups, cuts. And so, they're creating these almost easier looks for open opportunities off the ball than having to create offense from scratch through that sets that might be considered slightly more stagnant when compared to all these off-ball movement type of scoring opportunities. So, how are they doing it?
Yeah, so instead of like focusing on play types that Synergy would measure, they're really focusing on creating driving gaps, and then what was the other part I was going to say? Sorry. They're really focused on driving gaps and then the positioning and the spacing of every player on the floor. So that's really what they're focusing on. So instead of like the big screening for the small, they're really focusing on, okay, how do the other 4 players react to the one who has the ball? So a really easy example is you're going to have all 5 players, you're going to have 4 players outside the perimeter and 1 player in the dunker spot maybe. And you're going to get a drive from someone at the top of the wing. He's the ball. He's going to drive right. So the player in the dunker spot is going to cut to the corner. So a dunker to corner cut. The player that was on beside him on the strong side, he might cut to the dunker. Then you're going to get the wing is going to fill behind the drive, and you're going to get the person who was in the corner before. When the big goes to the corner, he's going to come up to the wing. So it's JJ Redick spoke about it recently. He called it a wheel pattern, which I like a lot better. I've been calling it like circular movement or a circle pattern, but the wheel pattern he's been calling it is really good. So yeah, just think of a wheel like you drive right, everyone's moving right. You drive left, everyone's moving left.
Right, it makes sense, and obviously no one has figured it out. But the Lakers did just play the Grizzlies pretty recently, and they kind of jumped out to an early lead. And during that halftime interview, he Redick quoted just that they were focused on getting their defense set, trying to slow down this wheel pattern and actually react to it. And so, how are they so effective moving off the ball? I'll pull up the freelance offensive sets here. So, what makes them so effective running freelance offense without the pick and rolls, without organized offense? And some of it you hit on, but what are they doing that's so different than the rest of the league, to where you noted in the article how the frequency of the freelance offense is much higher than it's ever been, and they're scoring a lot more often without running these organized sets.
Yeah, so like right away you can see look at the driving gap between so this is kind of a freelance set. It's kind of like a horns out kind of play, but that part gets denied. So they really go, flow into the next action here. So if we pause like right here, you can see there's a huge driving gap. I can't tell who it is, but someone in the corner, and then Scottie Pippen. Like that's a double gap they have right there. And then on the other side they have Jake and another player in the corner. I think it's Jaren. There's another double gap there, and you have, it looks like Jay Huff in the dunker spot. So really, they already created the gaps just based on spacing. You're going to go for the drive, kind of like an isolation possession. It's not meant to walk the player down and just score one-on-one. It's meant to create other opportunities. So look at those 2 gaps, and then as the players drive, it's really important that you look at how they space the floor to look at how the gaps stay. So yeah, let's play it. Okay, so Jake's driving right. Everyone drives right. That gets denied, but you can still there's still a gap there. And then when he goes to Jaren drives. He's going from the wing straight to the basket. So everyone's gonna follow behind him. So you're gonna see like Jay Huff is gonna go. He's gonna do a little dunker cut. Okay, you get Wells from the corner to dunker, and then you get Pippen, who was on the wing and now he's in the corner. Then they're going to go back. And then when Jaren drives, everyone shifts back. So you get like Huff going from either the corner of the dunker back to the other corner. You get the fill behind, and then you get the other 2 players are spacing behind. So the gap is still there. They created an empty gap there. But the important part is like really following Huff right here.
Yeah, I mean, it does look like you mentioned and Redick mentioned a wheel concept where like it's almost like everyone is just shifting in unison. Like they're all properly spaced to begin, and instead of like one person maybe shifting up the wing or one person kind of looking for an open spot to relocate to, they're just all thinking alike. And obviously that's the game plan. That's what they're trying to do to keep spacing as optimal as possible, is to just constantly move. So if you get downhill type of gravity, almost like shooting gravity, but with wherever the ball is. So maybe it's driving gravity, where like it's pushing them out and keeping them spread out versus pulling them in. And just depending on which way they're driving, where the ball's headed, and then that just kind of creates space for the ball on the ball. And if you catch the defense sleeping, then someone's going to be wide open because everyone is moving. So if the defense isn't rotating in sync along with the offense, someone's going to be open for a good look.
Yeah, and really you're trying to like punish the gap help. So it creates a lot of long closeout situations. Let's go into this next one. So you see it's 4 out spacing with 1 in. Okay, that's just like a dribble out back door because once he started dribbling towards, I don't know exactly what it was, but once Aldama started dribbling towards the other wing, the player just turned their head for a second and Pippen cut right off that.
Damn.
And that's the goal of the offense. So, this isn't like, it's not 100% of the time, but you're always looking for a layup because a layup is the most efficient shot in basketball. And so the two types are, you're going to either get like a driving or a cutting layup like that, which is most efficient. And then you're going to get the driving layup. And that's like the second most efficient. You get that off drives, off pick and roll. Here's another backdoor opportunity. Like again, it's for like 99% of players, the cutting shot at the rim is going to be the most efficient shot. It's like maybe like Steph Curry is better in shooting spot ups, but for almost everyone else, or someone like Zach Edey is going to be more efficient on post ups, just specific to this offense. But for everyone else, it's going to be cutting to the rim, and that's when you get like the 1.4 points per player, like the 1.5, 1.3 in the half court. So that's what they're going to try to do every time. You see a lot of layups, so it's nice. And then so after the cutting layups, after the driving layups, you're really trying to create a catch and shoot. So that's why you get all the spacing along the perimeter too. And it's, again, to punish the help. So you can see, I think these are in order of the teams they played this season. So you're going to see a lot of the same plays against similar teams. There you go. The shot on the perimeter wasn't open, so he passed it to Wells. His shot was open for Luke. Yeah, right there. And you do see they do handoffs, but really it's like Brandon Clark. You don't really want him shooting from the 3-point line. So every player supposed to be like non-positionless and play together. Yeah, it's better when he just goes to the next trigger. So a trigger can be sound like a screen, like you see here. But the play when it's back in neutral, so when there's no advantage created, the defense isn't tilted, you're going to get something like either like a backdoor cut can be a trigger, you can do a handoff as a trigger, or just a drive. So it's a lot of conceptual basketball is what I've heard it called, instead of like organized basketball. But that's really what you're looking for, is tilt the defense, and then when you're back in neutral, you want to create a new advantage, just using one of the different triggers that the coach gives.
Right, and it seems like it all flows right into it. Obviously, Jaren has really developed on the ball, especially with Ja out for so long. He had to kind of step up and become the main scoring option on top of being a defensive player of the year candidate and anchor. And, how many guys can actually do that? So he's developed as an ISO guy, a post-up guy. He's high volume individual offense and scores efficiently in both. And he's also kind of thought of as like a pick and pop guy because of his quick trigger catch and shoot 3-pointers. So one of the most versatile bigs in the league, inside and out, offensively and defensively, like a real anchor for that team. And then you have, Ja Morant's ISOs and Zach Edey post-ups when he finds a good mismatch to kind of like look for when you do have the advantage, when you are looking for some sort of bailout set. So it's just super interesting, what they're able to do. And I can kind of scroll through I have the article here, some of the data viz that show, if there's any one graph that you want to hit on, feel free. But, there's the freelance offense is the most frequent of all of them, with the organized offense much more than just the pick and roll type of sets. And you can see the numbers here, how it really jumped up from 36% to 48% in frequency. And, here's the visual here
so
for
you get
that
the different
frequency.
bands. So it's like what is it there? It's like 60 to 40% of the time, usually you're going to get the freelance, then 40 to 20, you're going to get like some organized stuff. Then under 20, which is the yellow line, you're going to get like you can get freelance pick and roll. So it's like, it's pretty consistent for every game. It's not like they have a different game plan every time. It's like really focusing on the freelance offense. And then creating like, because you still get like, you'll have different coverages, like maybe they're going to switch or you're going to get it against a zone. Like it's really creating advantages based off the coverage the defense is going to give you.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you got two of the best, bailout type of guys that can just go get a bucket in the league between Ja and Jaren, and they're walking mismatches in themselves with Ja's quick step, with Jaren's versatility. What stood out to you about Ja now that he's finally back, and then Jaren kind of coming back to maybe a secondary or co-star role shared with Ja this season?
Yeah, so Ja, the first thing that stands out to me for Ja is I think his playmaking took a leap this year. He still has like the same usage from years past, and really in this offense, you want a little more egalitarian offense. That's why there's so much cutting and so much spacing principles. But he has a similar. He's like 30 or something, like 98th percentile in usage. But I think the playmaking has really improved. The most notable thing probably is his defense has improved. His one-on-one defense. I think he said he added something like 15 pounds this year of muscle. I don't know how accurate that is. Everyone's going to say that, but you can really see like the way he walls off players right now. He probably came to the league at like 165, 170. Like you're not gonna be able to wall anyone off. But just sliding his feet, walling off his defender in one-on-one situations is really improved, and it's like his off-ball attention is improved too. But which is probably the most important, because you want Ja, you want him more as like a help or like a low activity defender. But just his commitment to improving on defense has been really impressive this year. Specific to Jaren, so honestly, I noticed these things last year too. Jaren took like a big jump last year, even though people weren't really watching the Grizzlies. So first, I'll say just in defense, last year, after Steven Adams went down in the preseason, the Grizzlies signed Bismack Biyombo. They added Xavier Tillman, but Jaren took a lot bigger role as an anchor defender. So instead of like when he went DPOY, he had like historic, not just shot blocking, but like rim protection. But he was mostly coming from like the weak side as the gaucho or like the low man, and you'll get the two-man action at the top. Like a pick and roll, maybe someone's going to drive to the rim and he's going to help off the defender, and that's really where he was good. Like the first 4 or 5 years of his career was just as like the secondary rim protection. But last year, especially after like Xavier Tillman got traded, Bismack Biyombo got waived to like make room for Vince. He took on a lot more responsibilities as like the pick and roll coverage defender, the anchor defender, and he hasn't always been strong at that. But last year he took a big jump in that, and you could see the improvement through the season, and particularly like in the drop coverage, his technique improved a lot, and that's continuing this year, I think. Grizzlies are with Zach Edey, Jay Huff as your other anchors. You're gonna get a lot of soft coverages, so like a lot of drop. A lot of ice coverages where you're trying to move the player, the offensive player, towards the sideline, something like that. But Jaren is a lot more versatile than those two, and he also like improved greatly in his drop defense. So not only is he the best secondary rim protector on the team, he's also the best primary rim protector. So that's like the biggest improvement on defense that he made. He was probably like after the All-Star break last year, and it's continuing this year. Like his rim protection is fantastic again. Like Todd Whitehead put up a graph the other day. I think is like Jaren's defending like something like 48% of shots at the rim, which is really good. He was like second among players under 7 feet tall or something like that. Then on offense, this again he improved last year, like through the season. But I think it's the versatility of his isolation scoring. So Jaren is a pretty good handler. He can dribble from the perimeter, and he's like very, very strong at timing when the gap help is going to come. So you get the 5 out again, and he's on one wing, the other player is on the other wing. When the defender comes, just to like stunt or dig at his drive to the rim. He's very good at just the hesitation and then going right into his drive. And like usually you're gonna have someone like Desmond Bain, Luke Kennard, who's one pass away. So if you do get the gap help, you can either pass it, but Jaren not the strongest passer. So you're gonna get the stunt. They're going to recover, and then Jaren's going to go. He can do that. He's also a very good post-up scorer, so you can throw it into the low post, or you can do like a little Barkley dribble from the perimeter into the low post and turn his back. So for me, like those are the two on offense and defense. Those are the two areas improved in the most.
Yeah, and he's right back to his rim protection ways. Like I wrote about Jaren for my first piece with Switch Theory when I joined them a while back, and this was back in 2023, but to me, he was just like fully blossoming into the two-way star he could be. Like he is the epitome of two-way versatility to me. He just brings so much to the game in the post, on the wing, on the perimeter. He can ISO, he can post up, he can hit the catch and shoot three. And then, like you mentioned, all the defensive versatility as your main rim protector, as your help side rim protector. He can play the 4 or the 5. And he just kind of does a lot of things efficiently. This year, he's efficient in just about everything. I mean, he's let's see here. He rates, I want to say, over 1 point per possession in every play type, it looks like, via synergy. Like he's spot ups 1.01, transition 1.2, post ups 1.1, ISOs 1.05, cuts 1.6, putbacks 1.1, pick and roll man 1.1, and pick and roll ball handler 1.1. It's like some of those are smaller possession volume than the other, but how many defensive anchors are above average, let alone good, efficient in every single offensive play type? Like he to me is probably the most versatile player in the league. Like it's hard to think of someone who's better. And going back to him as a draft prospect, what really stood out is all the ball skills that seemed developable at that point. Like he had similar block numbers and 3-point numbers as some of the other prospects in his draft class. But what separated him was like he clearly had a quick trigger for the jump shot. He clearly had like good feel of just making the right basketball play on both ends and a good motor. And then he also had a little post up move. Like he had good footwork in the post. He had a good handle for a big. He had a quick trigger jump shot. He had good touch around the rim. It was just all these little indicators that showed like he could really develop into more than just a shot blocking 3-point shooter, which alone, even if he was just that, would have been a good player in the NBA. And up to this season, he's still averaging 1.8 blocks and 1.5 steals. He's tied for 7th among players with at least 15 games in blocks per game. And Wemby's probably going to run away with the DPOY this year and maybe for the next decade. Who really knows what Wemby's going to be up to? But Jaren is good. He got one because he deserves that kind of credit for a defensive anchor. And I think he proved himself as an offensive star when Ja, was out of there for the injury and the suspension that year. And like he stepped up to show that he can handle giving you 28 and 3 blocks every single night. And kind of like be a one-man defense that not many players really can.
Yeah, it's good he got his one because with Chet, Wemby, he might not get a second one ever.
Yeah,
although I think this year is going to finish like somewhere in the top 5 so far.
Yeah, for sure. Can still make some all-defensive teams. For sure. It's still on the table. But Wemby's just that good. It almost has less to do with Jaren than it does Wemby. And he had stretches where I want to say he had 50 blocks in like 15 games.
Yeah.
For that might have been last season, but just an incredible defender. Learning Basketball is a Switch Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com. And so back to the piece itself, I thought maybe we could hop into some of the plays that you outlined. You mentioned some of the coaches might have brought over a few plays from their other experiences, like the Iverson follow empty. It seemed like a pretty interesting concept that they run fairly frequently now. and they might have not ran it much before this season. And then they also have a counter where they sequence into an Iverson follow step up, as it's termed. So I was wondering if you could kind of break down what that play is compared to just your normal little Iverson screen where one player starts on the wing and gets a stagger screen on the free throw line, runs through that stagger screen, and gets the other side. So that's your base Iverson. So what makes these sets a little bit different from those sets? And I'll pull it up here while you're talking.
Yeah, so Thomas Lisalo, he was the head coach of Paris in the Euro Cup last year, so Paris basketball, and then Bonds in I think like German B League, I think they were in. So he's been the coach. He was the coach for those for like past 3 years. He joined this year, and there was like 4 or 5 sets that when I watched the Paris games, you'd see every time, like in every game, and it was like mostly only those 4 or 5. But the big one was the Iverson follow empty. So there's nothing too special about this play. Like I've seen the Lakers run it this year too. But the basic premise is you're going to get 2 players at the horn. You're going to get 1 player down low. You're going to get a player cutting off the 2 screens, and you're going to have the ball handler. So there we just saw, Bane came off the Iverson screens. Or sorry, he made the Iverson cut off the 2 stagger screens. But there was really no action there for him to do because after he was just guarded too well. We'll see here, like they often use it as their opening possession. So you're going to get, and this is how it's usually lined up. You're going to get the first screener is going to be like a pick and pop threat. Second screener is going to be the roll man because you're really looking at the gravity of the role of the second screener. Because Bane's going to come off the cut. Jaren's going to follow the cut. And that's the follow part. And it can turn into like an empty side pick and roll. So you see that right here. And then if we play it, so Bane's just going to create a driving lane right for the basket. So, but the other thing that can happen is like Edey's man might confuse the tag responsibilities. So Edey can just roll to the rim and you get a bucket that way. See it again here. This is the step portion where it was guarded the first time, and it just turns into like a step-up pick and roll with Morant and Clark. And then I think on this specific play, like Clark's roll gravity is so strong that you see the low man. Oh, this is your team. You see the low man's going to help the tag, and then I think it's Wells is going to be open for the 3-point. Or is it Smart? Yeah, Smart's going to be open for the 3-point make. Who's the low man there? Is it Paolo?
Looks like Wendell is in the paint, and then Paolo is covering Smart on the corner.
Yeah. So Paolo's going to be the low man here. Okay, yeah. And like the thing to worry about there is Clark's rolling gravity. If he rolls, Paolo's going to have to tag him because he's the help on that play because Wendell Carter has to watch for Jaren. So it's a versatile play where like the 4 players directly involved in the action all have a role. We might see an example too where often the low man, so Paolo in this situation, he's going to get targeted by like Smart. So Smart at the same time that action is happening, he's going to cut along the baseline, and this is the same thing. It's part of like it's part of the circular movement. Okay, it would have been a little earlier. But it's part of the circular movement they also have in their freelance offense. So it's also happening like in their organized plays. So it's not like they take it off when they plan something. They're just always doing it. Okay, so Marcus Smart actually doesn't cut in this one. Sorry, that's my fault because he already started on that side and the empty pick and roll would have messed it up. But sometimes you're going to get the player, like the Mavericks were a good example. Luka Doncic he was the low man. So he wasn't involved like in either the stagger screens or in the cut. He was where Paolo would be right. Who's guarding Jake?
Looks like you got KCP low man right now.
Okay, so KCP. So you can see he's going to go back and forth along the baseline depending on where the drive is going to come from. So that's the circular motion. And like KCP, very good defender, but you don't want him as the low man defending that, or you don't want Doncic in the Mavericks situation. So you can get some. Sometimes it looks a little silly. You're going to get the drive, or there's going to be a little hesitation. They're going to drive the other way. So the baseline cut is just going to follow. It's going to go back and forth until they actually pick a driving lane, and then it opens up. Either that player from float from the dunker spot to the corner, and because their defender is defending the rim action, or you're going to get sometimes there was a very good LeBron example where Grizzlies used it as the opening timeout call, and LeBron fell asleep when Santo Aldama did the backdoor cut because he wasn't used to the movement pattern, and the Grizzlies targeted LeBron again in their most recent game with the same play. They didn't score because of the backdoor cut, I don't think, but it's like same idea. They just want to take the help, confuse the help, and then take advantage of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to keep defenses on their toes and like throw something that they might not know is coming when a lot of defensive rotations, I imagine, maybe it's not routine, but you probably think just about all the different ways that an offense can beat you. But if you're not aware of how the off-ball movers are moving and relocating, you might fall asleep for a second and get beat on a backdoor cut. And, that's, like you mentioned, the baseline guy, or that's kind of running baseline between the dunker spot and then maybe the two corners. Like he's just, like you said, looks a little silly because he's just running back and forth. Yeah. But really, he's trying to keep the strong side empty for the drive, and then also space the floor for either the dunker spot finish or even all the way out to the corner for a 3-point shot. And, that kind of forces his man, depending how good of a shooter or finisher he is, to stay on him. And the low man either has to help or stay on the guy he's guarding. And there's just bound to be some advantages that way that, the offense is able to create. So it's definitely a cool set here where, you get the initial Iverson. Ja likes to throw in a lot of herky-jerky movements I see where, like, he even, like, is disruptive within that set where he might catch somebody off guard because he feels an advantage more than a set play and might shoot back to run a different, pick and roll or drive or ISO or just attack the rim. So
another thing, a player like Ja, you see him in this clip, he's coming off the two screens. He doesn't need a pick and roll because like he's so fast. He's going 75% speed, and there's the two screens. So it's a little blurry, but I think it's like Aldama got his defender with the first screen, and like Ja's open up. He doesn't need the follow pick and roll. He has a path to the basket, and you can see like the help was confused, and that's how it resulted in an open 3-point shot.
Yeah, and it's very aptly named after Iverson for similar reasons, I think, where Iverson had that blazing speed where you have him on the move, you force his man to run through two screens, and that alone creates something of an advantage for your ISO player on the wing to already have a step on the defense, where he can then use that first step burst, that explosiveness, the handle, the vision, and the scoring ability to just be on the move and attack before you even need to set up anything with the screen. So it's really it fits the personnel well for Memphis to just, it makes sense when you really walk through all the different steps of why are they running this play so often? Well, you have Jaren Jackson, just an absolute knockdown, pick and pop threat as one of the screeners who is able to rescreen smartly if he's going to run a second pick and roll. You have Zach Edey, who's a walking post-up mismatch anytime he rolls to the rim. And you have Brandon Clark with his vertical gravity as a roller, just, high-flying, pick and roll, slam dunk machine when he's rolling to the rim. And even, Jay Huff has shown he can hit the pick and pop. He can be a catch-and-shoot guy. So, their bigs fit the scheme very well. And like you said, it's just a slight variation of a set that's been around for a while that is a way to create good looks for the whole team, whether it's at the rim or from beyond the arc.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, this is the Thomas Lisalo set that he brought over for sure. The other I don't think we have the clips right now, but it's it's a 1-4 flat. So you're gonna have like 4 players along the baseline, and the guard is going to be at the top of the key, and you can use like any of the 4 players on the baseline to come and set the step up screen. One of my favorite clips that I've done is it was against the Bulls. So Giddey's one of the worst defenders in the league. The Bulls pre-switched Giddey off the step up screen because they knew it was going to be smart to come to set it. So instead, Ja audibled for LaRavia, who was in the corner, to come and set the screen instead. So that's been like their, last 2 minute end of game, end of quarter when the game really slows down. The flat or 1-4 flat alignment is just what I call it. That usage is really increased, and again came from Lisalo. Yeah, and I'll just talk really briefly. The wheel pattern came from his name's LaRoche. So the first time I heard about LaRoche was like 4 years ago when there was like a very good draft Twitter user. He now works for an NBA team. LaRoche was his mentor, or one of them at least, and his draft philosophy was really designed around like LaRoche, kind of like playing in a LaRoche system. So having like 5 players who are positionless, and they all can do similar things. Like they all can attack a closeout. They can switch and like kind of defend or check every position. And it really lends itself to valuing wings. So Zach Edey was a little bit of a surprise as like a draft pick for this system, but LaRoche brought that over, and he was like a D3 Division 3 player. His head coach in Division 3 was Rob Santacola, who now is an assistant with the Memphis Hustle. So you can see really Memphis has been like influenced by this philosophy, and they're really trying to instill it. So we've seen it at D3. Virginia ran it a little bit the year after they won their championship. I think it was like 2021 is the year they used it. They had Johnny Carpenter on staff, and he's now with the Grizzlies too. So he was another like LaRoche, Rob Santacola kind of disciple. We've seen Army women's team use it also in college basketball. So really, it hasn't been used in the NBA before, but the Grizzlies have been obviously influenced by LaRoche and like the thought process of his offense. Yeah, so those are the two heads. Thomas Lisalo is definitely the lead assistant, and LaRoche is the player development assistant, or like player development lead. He's been doing with Integrity Hoops. He's been doing that for like a decade, maybe even more. But those are like definitely the two philosophies coming together that you can see under TJ.
Yeah, and that's actually the second LaRoche shout out on this podcast. Brandon Benson gave him a shout as the PD guy for Memphis, that he's been a fan of his work. And I mean, you can see it all come together, like you said, between the new sets and then the off ball movement. Like it's very innovative, and it feels like it's one of those things that is almost a no duh moment once you see it. It's like, yeah, of course everyone should be moving on a string off the ball all the time. Why isn't every team doing this? And I'm sure it's something that probably will get picked up and adopted by the entire league when like we mentioned, the Grizzlies have a top 5 offense without running pick and rolls and DHOs every single time down the floor. And it doesn't mean they don't involve handoffs, but a lot of their plays are not ending with those things. They're ending with cuts, off-ball cuts, transition opportunities, drives to the rim, and spot-up catch and shoot threes. And so, shout out to him for innovating something that feels like every team should adopt pretty quickly. And there was one other play that you highlighted that I thought was pretty interesting, with the horns out, stack out chase, and just kind of comparing that to your regular horns, where maybe you have 2 screeners on each side of the ball. Man, the Brandon Clark gets up, man. Like he throws down some highlight slams. It's always fun to see him like power through. Kind of reminded me of AG a little bit, Aaron Gordon back in the draft day, when as like a comp with some of that play finishing.
It's like very very good touch too from that area. So it's going to start in like the horns alignment. So again, you're going to have 2 players in the corner, 2 players at the free throw line, like at each point, and then the ball handler. I call it horns. I call it horns out. A lot of people are going to call it stack out. Same thing. Doesn't really matter what you call it. But it's going to be an out screen for either of the player. And the Grizzlies don't always use like a guard and a big in the spot. Sometimes they'll use 2 bigs. Sometimes they'll use 2 guards. Doesn't really matter. But you're going to get an out screen, which just like very simple. Like just going to get the big is going to screen the player. Guard's going to go to the wing and catch it. So you'll see right here, Edey sets it for Jake. There's no play for Jake, but there is Edey's going to do like a little step up screen for Ja now. And it's like It's very simple. It's just to get either like an angle pick and roll if the out screen is successful, or like a middle pick and roll right here with Edey when the out screen is not successful. One question for me is like, why is this so much more effective for the Grizzlies this year than like their freelance pick and roll? Because it's basically the same thing. You're getting like a fraction of a second to like confuse the two defenders of like who's getting the ball. But like besides that, it's just like a classic pick and roll. And that's something I want to explore more. I don't have the answer right now, but this has been their most efficient and most frequent set this year, which is really crazy to me. Last year, this is the other helpful part. Oh, going back to Iverson, Grizzlies did 7 Iverson entries total last year. So like the player coming off the Iverson cut and receiving the ball, they did 7 that I tracked. This year, I haven't updated, or like I have updated on my spreadsheet, but I'm just going to go with the number in the article. It's like 42 or something like that. So you can see the influence. Okay, 41 in the article after 25 games. So it's like, it's not quite 2 a game, but it's almost. But horns out chase, that's just what I'm going to refer to. That was one of their worst actions last year. It was something they used a lot, but it's something they were scoring like 0.8 points per possession, when now it's up to something like 1.1 or something like that. What do I have here? Okay, I got 1.2. And then something else I've been tracking this year is expected efficiency. So like it just uses like the past 3 years of data for like Desmond Bane from the corner has shot X% the past 3 years. So I'm going to use that in the formula. Then I'm going to use on wide open 3-point shots, he shot this. On covered shots, he shot this. So I'm going to do that to get like an expected point possession for every play. And it's also the highest. It's like 1.07, which would be top for the Grizzlies, and it would be like top in the league if that was the average for every half-court possession. But that's something I got to look into more, is like really digging down. Do they get like a higher percentage shots from 3? Do they get to the rim more frequently, and like what's the reason for it? So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like you said, why so much more efficient this year than last? And the first thing that pops out to me in terms of just the slight difference between just a more traditional pick and roll is that extra half second of processing. Like maybe the roll man is caught up on the first screen enough where he thinks something else is going to happen, and then he realizes he's guarding pick and roll, and now he's got to stop a Bane or a Ja or Smart from running it at the top, and maybe he spends that extra half step. Maybe he loses half a step. Maybe he's just a little too focused on it, where he loses the roll man in the process. Versus you're guarding the screener and the pick and roll is coming. That's my first thought, but that's kind of not giving the defense enough credit as well. That thought. So I'm obviously not sure. I'm just going off of what the play looks like and what could be slightly different this year. Like this random example, Edey seems to think it's a normal pick and roll, and then he goes and sets the out screen, and so he's got Giannis chasing him around a little more. Maybe he's not even looking at the ball for a second, and then he goes back up and runs the screen. So maybe Giannis is thinking to like hard hedge or double the ball a little. Maybe he leans into like instincts instead of whatever the game plan is, or maybe that is the game plan and they're just getting beat. But and there's some of the off ball cut that we're talking about where once he gets past the man, it's almost 3-on-1. It's at least 2-on-1, but you got Ja beating everyone. The help has to step up from the corner, and there's a wide open. If he doesn't move, he's got a wide open 3. He does move, so he's got a wide open dunk. And either way, or a Ja floater, but you'll take the dunk every day of the week.
Yeah.
So
it's like really taking advantage of the coverage. Like on the last one, it was Giannis was like showing like a little soft hedge, and on that one, you're getting Brook Lopez like dropping far back in the paint. So it's like really reading the advantage that's created. The advantage here is there's a soft hedge. Ja beats both of them, and I think it's Taurean Prince probably the low man. He's like way off all them because he's got to come help.
Yeah, and Giannis is just like I don't know if he's way out of position or not, but he's way beat very early. Like they do not trap Ja in the least on this side. If anything, he ignores the screen because of where Giannis is, and that acceleration from Ja facing the right way while Giannis is almost trying to play catch up to the screen that far away from the rim. It's like an advantage, 5 feet beyond the 3-point line already, and that just happens to be one play, but just a good job of Ja reading the defense, like you said, and it is kind of shows that it can be a lot of like flow reads within the set, like you were mentioning before, and not necessarily just a static play that has to be run a certain way. It's much
Yeah,
more
that's a
read
big
and react
principle
based.
of Thomas Lisalo is like you don't have to run the play if the advantage is already created. And so the advantage here is they're like hedging or they're showing. And so you don't like going if you executed the play, you're going right into what Giannis wants you to do. If you reject the screen, you beat your two defenders. So it's not always about executing the play, it's about recognizing you got a qualitative advantage or a quantitative advantage. Here it's quantity. You got two players that are guarding you. So create the advantage there. That's what it is.
There it is. So I mean, Memphis is doing something right when you're ranked top 5 on offense and defense, and you're doing it without pick and rolls and handoffs, or at least the traditional way. Like obviously, it goes without saying they've done an incredible job team building, drafting, loading up the bench with good basketball players who can defend their own position, switch a little bit, dribble, pass, and shoot. Just very few weaknesses in their game, and you surround superstars with those type of players, and you're gonna build a winning basketball team. And so, one parting thought is on the rookies. Do you think that any of their shortcomings, maybe in the draft, will show up in the playoffs, or do you think it'll just be more of how effectively they've been? Obviously, Jaylen Wells has been a revelation, just guarding the other team's best player as a lockdown type of defender, and he was drafted. I forget exactly, but like 41st or pretty late in the
That's
draft.
39. I'm not
There you
100%
go.
certain though.
Yeah, like around the 40th pick, give or take, and he was a late draft pick in the second round, and now he's starting almost the majority of the season as one of the marquee perimeter defenders on a playoff team. And then Zach Edey is a walking post up mismatch. Like he's maintained that scoring efficiency near the rim. And the only question with him, for me at least, and for other critics, is will his defensive mobility hold up when it matters most? Like, will he be able to switch often? Will he be able to, stunt out on the perimeter and get back? Not really in the regular season as much, but in a marquee role, like a top 9 rotation role, maybe even starting for a playoff team. And that's the long term worry. If he's able to do it as a rookie, I mean, that's super impressive. So, how do you think these guys and the rest of the rotation, anyone we haven't hit on, maybe like Smart, obviously, has been a fun addition for them too. So, how do you think these guys will hold up come playoff time?
Yeah, so Wells has started the majority of games at like the small forward spot. Um, I was a little lower on Wells in the draft because I didn't think the defense was very good. Uh, but he was guarding off ball a lot, and he was like getting lost on backdoor cuts or like different actions. But like his one-on-one individual defense, when he's locked in, he's very very good. Against the Wizards, we saw him like he top locked Jordan Poole for like the whole game. Jordan Poole only had 6 field goal attempts. Finished with like 9 points. The previous game he had 35 against the Nuggets. Poole's not the most consistent player, but he's definitely like the offensive engine of Washington. So you just shut him down for the whole game, and you shut down their number one option. Whether or not he should be number one option doesn't matter. But that was like one reason why I was a little lower. So the one-on-one defense has been incredible for me, especially for a rookie. And then the other part was it's like obviously he's an elite positional shooter with size, but he was not a good finisher at the rim. I think he finished like 50% or something, like pretty poor for a player who's 6'7". Um, he wasn't a very good. He's not a good playmaker. His like feel for playmaking is pretty low. But if you put him in a situation like this where it's egalitarian and you're creating the gaps, you're working off cuts and spot ups, it's a little easier for him to know like what the read is because you're not going to design a play for him. He does sometimes like it gets a little sticky and he's taking some like 20-foot mid-range shots, whatever, learning experience. But I think immediately he's been impacting and impactive. And then in the playoffs, I think there's definitely a spot for him. When you look at the Grizzlies rotation, it's like they're going to get like Marcus Smart is going to be like the 3 in any like closing sets or like playoff matchups. Like at least I think he should be. And then because he's the best feel, he's the best defender out of like that little wing group. And he's like very strong, so he can switch. He's very versatile, and he's much better like off-ball defender than someone like Jalen Wells would be. But they also have Vince, who hopefully is coming back. Hopefully, it's not a lost season for him. And he's like similar to Smart. He's pretty strong. He's very versatile. His 3-point shooting was good last year. So I think like those are your 2 main options at like the 3 spot, if we're talking like position specifically. But they can both play down to a 2. Jalen Wells can play down to a 2. Marcus Smart can play up to a 4 in some lineups, like with a Jaren or an Edey. Marcus Smart can play a 4. So I feel like those are probably the main 3 you're looking at for like the 2, 3, 4 position. Like besides like Bane, obviously Bane's starting to. But GG Jackson is also going to come back. I think Jalen Wells' feel is better than GG Jackson. He's a better one-on-one defender. I don't really like either as an off-ball defender, but I think he's like 3rd in that kind of pecking order behind Smart and Vince. So I do think there's a spot for him, especially in like the first round, second round, when you're getting down to like you're playing 7 players who are going to combine for like 240 minutes or something like that. Like they're going to combine for like 85 to 90% of the minutes, but you can throw in a Jalen Wells just for his shooting gravity and his one-on-one defense. Do you have any thoughts on Jalen Wells just before I go to Zach?
Yeah, I mean, like you hit on, and like I was mentioning a little bit before, that his defense is really impressed. You can throw him out on the perimeter, and he can guard the other team's, arguably their best wing, their best guard. And then on the egalitarian point with the offense, I was just looking up some of the 3-point numbers, and there's 8 different players shooting 3.7 or more threes per game, and they all range between 3.7 and 5.5, and they're all pretty efficient. Like there's more, like Ja's a little lower at 31.6%, Smart's a little lower at 32.5, Bane's a little lower at 31.7, but the rest of them are 43%, 41%, 38, 39, 36, and Jalen Wells is one of them. So he's hitting 4.5 threes. He's launching 4.5 threes a game, hitting 39% of them. And so when you're a lockdown defender type, like a really plus positive defender, impact defender who makes winning plays, and you're hitting 39% of your threes on good volume, like there's probably a role for you, as long as you don't have any other holes in your game that can be taken advantage of, like you mentioned, like decision making as a rookie and maybe inefficient shot taking. Like hopefully that gets kind of fine tuned out. And obviously, if you're good at those shots, then you can live with it. So that's the other side of it too. But I think those numbers show the idea that there's 8 different players hitting roughly 4 or more threes per game, or sorry, taking 4 or more threes per game. That the ball's moving, that the ball is finding the open man, that most of these players are pretty efficient from deep, and they're sharing the load. So that kind of falls right in with the idea, the wheel concept idea of like, if we're not getting a shot at the rim, someone should be open for 3.
Yeah.
And then Edey, like you mentioned, I was mostly just wondering if you think his defensive mobility will hold up in the playoffs, given that like he has shown he is still a rim roller, post up, walking mismatch, can set super strong screens, has an interesting dynamic with Ja Morant in that sense, where you have this big prodding big that's going to set a super strong bouldering screen, create a little advantage at the top. And if he's not, flying super high for an alley-oop like Brandon Clark, he's at least rolling to the rim and ready for a post-up where he's basically a mismatch over any human alive with his size, and at least his touch directly at the rim. We'll see how far away from the rim he develops a jumper. But, do you think long-term is what I was wondering more for the draft, but in terms of this season, do you think Edey will play a key role for them in the playoffs?
So I think, like when I was picturing Edey coming out of the draft, I was like, he can be like a wrinkle off the bench, or like just like a change of pace kind of player, change of pace big. So I think he definitely has matchups against. So we're in between two games for the Grizzlies. It's Lakers and Golden State right now. Against the Lakers, he can be a drop big. Doesn't really have to worry too much about like their guards. Like D'Lo's obviously he's a good pull up shooter, but you don't have to worry about really their shooting gravity coming off the screen. Um, Lakers did like expose him at some points, so he doesn't have much experience guarding like a Spain pick and roll or just what I'm going to call stack screen. He's gigantic human. He gets caught on that back screen, and that's really what happened in both the games. Me personally, I'm not really worried about his like isolation one-on-one defense, because very often, or not very often, is he going to be switched in a pick and roll to defend like Luka in a one-on-one situation. The Grizzlies, they're just not going to do that. Now, against against Golden State coming up, you can't play like the typical drop like 5 feet back against Steph, because he's going to come off that screen, he's going to throw it up. So so I think he's definitely matchup dependent. Against Lakers, AD's huge, LeBron's huge, Rui's huge, gigantic front court. I think that's like a decent matchup for him. Maybe he can play like 20 minutes in those games come playoff time. Against a team like Golden State, maybe he can play like 8 minutes a game. So if Steph's playing like 40 minutes, you don't want him lined up with that. You can always do something like, it's kind of difficult to like put Jaren in the pick and roll and have Edey be the low man. Like he's not versatile like that as a defender, in my opinion. So he's more just like change of pace, matchup dependent. I think if they're facing like a Lakers team or a Nuggets team who has a big front court, he can definitely play round 1, round 2. It's round 3 and round 4 when it gets like down to the final 6 or 7 players. I don't really see Edey as one of those 6 or 7 unless it's like a gigantic front court that they really need him for again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think matchup dependent is the key word for like his availability, and like for any rookie to get burned in the playoffs is impressive. So for him to even have matchups where he is a top 7, 8, 9 guy, like that's a key piece. And I think like you noted, picking him almost doesn't match up with some of the general philosophy of their draft profile, but it does provide something of a different matchup advantage for specific matchups, where at least you have a guy like, not quite this impact, but the Hartenstein to Chet Holmgren on the Thunder, where you have a more prodding traditional big man in size, post-up defense, drop defense that can give you a little bit of that edge, the strong screening, and just that girth in the paint against these other big front courts like you mentioned. And if there's value in that, with the strong screening with Ja, with the drop defense and the size against other big front courts, then at least your coaches have that option rather than like the 10th guy that can be super versatile but maybe not very like traditionally big. So they clearly have a lot of those guys that fit around Ja and Jaren. So it makes sense when you at least kind of retroactively talking yourself into why they would target a player so different than the caliber and type of prospect that they normally would. But I want to thank you a lot for hopping on. I know you got to hop out of here. It was super fun talking Grizzlies. Always down to talk hoops and the draft and Grizzlies. We'll have to do it again sometime. It's a lot of fun, Al.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. Is this one coming out after Evan? I don't want to follow Evan. He's one of the Twitter X's and my goats. That's not me. He's that was a really good episode. I love it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, Evan's the man. I don't think it'll come out because the next one's coming out tomorrow. Okay. So I have to kind of load up one that's already ready, and I've got a lot kind of on the back burner.
Someone else smarter than me, but that's okay.
No doubt. I'll keep an eye out for you to make sure that you're the star of the week.
Yeah.
I like it. We'll get it out there and let the people know what the Grizzlies are up to.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I was just worried about following Evan, but
it's a big act to follow.
Yeah,
no worries. Yeah, no, this was great. Really Love how like specific and focused we got on the Grizzlies, on what they're running, on the stars of their show, and some of the draft prospects that they prioritize this year, the rookies. So it's a lot of fun. Happy to do it anytime. Man.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. Talk soon.
Have a good one, Adam.
You too.